Hi, this is Jason Salemi. I'm an associate professor of epidemiology at the University of South Florida College of Public Health. Today is Monday, July 27th, and as this title would imply, I've only got one issue that I'd like to cover today, and it's an old issue, but one that continues to be the bane of my existence, and that's this notion of positivity, trying to dig under the numbers to really understand what's being done in terms of the various ways that we can calculate the proportion of either people or tests that are returned positive. And so some of the data that we tend to see is the number of persons tested daily. This is on the statewide report that's on a PDF document that's provided daily to us. There is the percent of positive labs. Again, that's something that's provided on a daily basis. There is the percent positivity for new cases, also something that's provided daily. The percent positive for laboratory testing, that's something that is provided weekly by the Department of Health. And last but not least, this notion of case positivity and when are we actually getting analyses down to the person level versus the test level. And so ahead of time, I'm going to apologize. I know a number of people have dug into this and probably uncovered everything that I'm getting ready to talk about, but I haven't seen it in a one-stop shop. So again, it's something that helps me to walk through this, and so hopefully it will help others to better understand these data. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is just what do we mean by persons tested on a cumulative basis, and it's something that's provided daily. So these are just two reports side by side. One is the report that was released yesterday on July 26th. The one on the right was released on July 25th. And again, it's at the person level. That's at least what the title suggests, right? It says persons tested, and it gives you a breakdown of the total number of people tested, the total who have tested positive, the total who have tested negative, and so on. And so the other place that we tend to see the number of people tested on a daily basis, but not cumulative, right? This is just the total number that are actually tested on any given day, is on page 2 of the statewide report, where it talks about number of people tested per day, right? And if a person is tested multiple times in one day, they have a way of aggregating that information to the person level. In essence, if a person tests negative multiple times, they're counted as negative. If they test positive multiple times on the same day, they're counted as positive. And if they test both negative and positive on a given day, they are counted as positive, right? But again, this is just the notion of where do we get information on the total number of people tested on a daily basis. Then we've got the percent of positive labs, again, something else that is provided on that statewide report daily, and this is where it appears, right? And so what's nice about this is towards the top of each bar, and again, each bar corresponds to a different day, that's the number of negative tests, or better stated, the number of people who are classified as negative on a given day. The bottom number is the number of people who are classified as positive on a given day. And then, of course, if we just divide the number of positive people divided by the total number of people tested, we get a percent positivity. This is actually, again, based on the definition that is provided here, this is as close to we get as the case positivity, right? Because this is, each bar is specific at the person level. And so again, we can say that on July 25th, 14% of people tested positive. But of course, as we start to aggregate information over multiple days, a person who is tested on the 24th, if they're also tested on the 25th, could appear on each of these bars, right? But within a given day, each analysis is at the person level. Now let's contrast that with the percent positivity for new cases. This is also provided daily. And in this case, we don't actually get numerator and denominator for this calculation. That's part of why I'm putting this video together, so we can better understand maybe what that numerator and denominator look like. Certainly the text description of what that should be is provided. And again, the numerator in this case is the number of people who test positive for the first time. The denominator is the total people tested on that day. And from the entire calculation, what's different is anybody who has tested positive on a previous day is excluded from the calculation. And so again, we'll talk a little bit about that in just a second. And then we've got this weekly report that comes out called the percent positive for laboratory testing. This is from the Florida Department of Health dashboard. You can see on a weekly basis they are providing that number, which is essentially that percent positivity for new cases. And again, it's aggregated to the level of the week. Below that, it's doing the same thing on a weekly basis. It's showing you the number of people who tested positive and the number of people who tested negative. Again, excluding all individuals in a given week who had previously tested positive. And so what do we know currently using these daily reports that are provided to us? So we know the number of new people tested today, right? On any given day when a report comes out, they tell us the total number of new people that are tested today. We know the number of people testing positive for the first time, right? That's the newly reported cases. We know the total people tested today. We know the total people who tested positive today. We know the total people who tested negative today. And we know the case positivity for today. Again, out of the total number of people who were tested on a given day, what percentage of those people tested positive? We have an already calculated percent positivity for new cases. We just went over that. And we know the cumulative positive tests, right? Including repeat tests. So again, a lot of information, and again, the cumulative negative tests, including repeat tests. So again, even if somebody has been tested multiple times, we have information that is at the person level as well as at the test level, all in that 40-something page statewide report that comes out daily. But some of what we don't know, or we don't know it easily, right? We can certainly figure this out, which again is part of the purpose behind this video. Of the people tested today, what percentage of those people had a repeat test? You know, how many of these individuals were tested for the first time versus they've been tested in the past regardless of what that result was, but they're just getting a test, but you know, they've tested already. So again, differentiating between those two is something that would be of value. Of the people testing positive today, what percentage of those positive tests were a repeat positive? So again, this notion of somebody tested positive yesterday, they're getting tested routinely, they maintain that positive test result today. But again, trying to understand of everybody who tests positive today, how many of those people were testing positive for the first time versus had a repeat positive test? Of all of the people testing negative today, what percent were among those who previously tested positive, right? So do we have a person who's negative, negative, negative? Or were they a positive at some point and now they're testing negative? Or is this a person who's just been tested for the very first time and happened to test negative? That differentiation is important. Another question, of those people tested today, who had not previously tested positive? Again, all of these are circulating around the same thing. This last one is important for assessing the denominator of what the Florida Department of Health reports, which is the percent positivity for new cases. Why is this important? Because we exclude those individuals who had previously tested positive. So knowing who has not previously tested positive is important. And again, if you'll remember that graphic that I showed you, it gives the percent positivity for new cases, but in that case, it doesn't give you numerator and denominator. And then how is that weekly measure, that weekly report that comes out, how is that measure likely calculated? Okay, so let's break down the numbers just a little bit and see where we can get with this. So I want to know new people tested today and new cases. This is easy to determine, but again, I wanted to show you kind of where we come up with this information. On the left is the PDF for the most current day of interest. On the right is that same PDF highlight for the previous day. And so I'm just showing you some calculations that I had done in Excel, very basic. The top row is corresponding to the current day, right? So that's the cumulative number of positive people. I just took it from right here. The number underneath that is the same number from the previous day. And this would be what you see in terms of new reported cases on a daily basis. So in this case, yesterday, we reported 9,344 cases. Those cases were not all confirmed yesterday, but that's the new number of people based on the information we had that were reported. And then we can do the same thing with the cumulative negative and the cumulative persons tested. So again, this helps us to determine there were 50,126 new people tested on this day, and 9,344 of them were brand new positives, right? Good information to have. So the next thing is people with new versus repeat tests. So again, this is part of the PDF document up here at the top. You can see we'll focus in on July 25th, which was yesterday's report. And so we see the total number of people who tested negative, the total number of people who tested positive. So again, just reminding you what we just did on the previous slide, right? We were determining the total number of new people tested. And this is the total number of people tested today. Because remember, these numbers include both people who were tested for the first time, as well as people who had previously been tested on another day, right? So with this, we've got total people tested and the new people tested. So we can use the information in both of these to try and calculate information on new versus repeat tests. So let's see if you follow me here. So if I take the total number of people tested on this day, right? We'll plot that over here. And then I say, okay, how many of those were tested for the first time? If we subtract those two numbers, we can get the total number of people tested on this day, but in whom it is a repeat test. Another way of saying that is how many people tested today had been tested on a previous day. And in this case, it was 47% of all people had already been tested on a previous day. And then we can do the same thing with the positives, right? We can say this is the total number of people, 13,289, who tested positive today. And we know that 9,344 of those were new positives. And so with some simple subtraction, we can say then 3,945 people, or 29.7%, of all those who tested positive today were repeat positive tests. Okay? The next thing is, what about the negative test today? We're trying to differentiate between a negative test today that it was a person who had previously tested positive versus a person who had previously been tested but had always tested negative versus somebody who's never been tested before and it's just a brand new negative test result. So why this is important is because we want to be able to drill down to understand how that percent positivity for new cases is being calculated. Because again, we need to be able to exclude people who have previously tested positive. And again, it's not extremely easy to do that because they don't provide numerator and denominator for that particular calculation. So let's dig into this a little bit. So again, here's the numbers for July 25th. So we know the total number of positives and the total number of people who tested negative. So let's just break this down. Again, 13,289 people who tested positive on this day. We already know from our previous calculations that 3,945 of those people who tested positive today had already tested positive on a previous day. 9,344 of them were first-time positives. And again, this is going to be the numerator for that case positivity for new cases. It's first-time positives. So now let's look at that negative number, 81,483 people who tested negative today. If we solve for the denominator, okay, so again, remember the denominator of this calculation is the total number of people tested on this day, right? So if we just take what we know to be the numerator for this number, 9,344, here's the denominator we're trying to solve for, and we know from the Department of Health's calculation, this is the percent positivity for new cases. Again, just solving for X, we get 84,485. That's the total number of people tested today who had not previously tested positive. And so if we just do some simple subtraction, we get this, right? What we're subtracting is the first time positives, and we get 75,141. So again, it may be a little confusing here, so just hang on with me for a second. Let's break down all people tested today, and hopefully it will make some sense. So again, of the 94,772 people tested today, 9,344 were first-time positives. It's green because we're going to include them in the calculation. There were 3,945 who tested positive, but they had already previously tested positive, right? So again, almost 30% of all people testing positive today had already tested positive on a previous day. They will be excluded from the calculation of the percent positivity for new cases. then there were 75,141 negatives among people never testing positive before. Again, they're going to be included in this calculation. But we also had 6,342 negative test results today among those who had previously tested positive. And again, that's 7.8% of all people testing negative today who had previously tested positive. It would make sense, in my opinion, that this percentage is lower than the repeat positives. But again, this is breaking down, again, the total number of people tested today into these four categories. And then, of course, that helps us because now that calculation, the percent positive for new cases, is essentially this. It's the total number of people testing positive for the first time divided by the total number of people tested on that day. And again, excluding what's in red here, both positive and negative test results for people previously testing positive. That number is 11.06, which of course matches the number that was given in the daily report. And again, all of this information is at the person level. What they do is they make sure to aggregate to the person level. So we're missing repeat tests for the same person on a given day. But again, I think that's going to be somewhat rare. So I think this is a good approximation of where all of the numbers are coming from. And so I put all of this into Excel and I calculated this information over a 1-week time frame. This is probably really hard for you to see, but I've highlighted the numbers that might, make some sense. So we're going from most current day to the oldest day within a given week, again, 7 days here. And so what you can see, if we're looking at the percentage of persons tested today that had previously been tested, that percentage in general is kind of going up a little bit. It was as high as half of the individuals on July 25th, at least the report that came out on July 25th, almost exactly half of the individuals tested on that day had previously been tested. And so again, the other numbers that I'm providing here are among the positive tests, how many had tested positive already, and among the negative tests on that day, how many had tested positive previously. So again, just some, hopefully useful information for those of you crazy individuals like me who want to get under the hood of these calculations. And so now we go to the weekly percent positive for new cases. Again, I'm just showing you the graphic from the Florida Department of Health's website that is tracking this information on a weekly basis. And so this is the downloaded data set that you can get access to. What you can see is this is all about the statewide numbers, and there's one row per week. So we're getting more and more current as we go down on this spreadsheet. And the most salient information is the number of negative tests, the number of positive tests, adding these two together to get the total number of tests done, and then the percent positivity is just the number of positive tests divided by the total number of tests, right? So how are we getting these numbers? It's not only provided for the state, but this particular report is also listed for every single county. So again, useful to try and find out how these calculations are being made. So again, I'm just honing in on the most current week, which just came out, I believe today, or maybe it was yesterday, but I downloaded this data set. And so let's focus in on the positive tests. How are we getting this number on the weekly report of 73,654? What I can tell you is this number is not the new cases reported during the week. So you might think, well, let's just, for each day, we get this report and we say, okay, there's 9,344 new cases today. If we just added up that number for the 7 days, we would get this number, right? And I can tell you it is not that. What it is based on the date that the case was confirmed. So I mentioned earlier on that the date that a case is reported is not necessarily the same day that the case was confirmed, right? So I can tell you that this number is based on the date that the case was confirmed, so using the previous week. And I can also tell you that this number excludes, like so many other metrics, non-resident cases. How do I know this? So I looked at my own dashboard and I'm like, well, how do I get that number? And so ultimately, as you can see in the red box here, that's 73,654. How did I get it? Well, this epidemic curve that I've highlighted the most recent 7 days for is based on the date that the case was confirmed. So again, that's how I knew that it was not the number of cases reported, but actually based on the date that the case was confirmed. And then you can see up here, I had to, because when I first did this, I did not get the right number, but if I then restricted to Florida residents, I was able to get the number that they're putting in this report. So I have 100% confidence on where the number of people testing positive came from. And again, think of it what you will, but another metric that is just restricted to Florida residents. So what about this number, the number of negative tests, or the number of people testing negative during the week? This is still a little bit more of a black box to me. Hopefully somebody else has figured this out and can help me out with this, but I can tell you, it's not the difference in the total number of negative tests at the beginning and the end of the week. So that's what I thought, is if I take the total number of tests at the end of the week minus the total number of people testing negative at the beginning of the week. But no, that number is actually 408,763. What I really thought it was at the beginning is the sum of persons tested each day who had not previously tested negative. Because again, remember, that's the definition of this. And again, it is not that. I use my Excel spreadsheet, I calculated those numbers, and when I add them all up, I get a higher number, 600,487. What my guess is it's that number above. It's the sum of the persons tested each day who had not previously tested negative, but I think it's first restricted to residents, not non-residents, and I think it's unduplicated to remove people who tested negative on multiple days within the week. So that's a mouthful, but again, I can't do that calculation without raw data and being able to know, who actually tested positive on both Monday and Wednesday, so I could only count them once. Again, I think you have to have the raw underlying data in order to do that. And so the positives were easier for me because obviously I have detailed information that the Florida Department of Health provides on each case, and a case is just somebody who's tested positive. I don't have that detailed information on everybody who tests negative. So that's why it's my guess as to how they're getting that number. Again, I think it's a combination of making that 600,000 number smaller by, again, removing people who were tested multiple times within the same week and also restricting to residents. And so just a quick bonus, I was hoping to better understand, because remember, those reports essentially give us the total number of people tested. And they say if a person was tested multiple times in the same day, we ended up classifying them as positive or negative, depending on how those tests laid out. So I was like, well, how many people are actually getting multiple tests in a day? Again, this is just what's reported at the person level. And I actually thought, so again, in the statewide report, what you basically get, so each of those two bars that say total, the top one is just from the current day, the bottom one is from the previous day. And this is kind of at the very end of that statewide report. This is the total number of tests that were performed. And in this particular table, they say if a person was tested multiple times, we include them multiple times. So this would include the repeat tests. And I thought just by subtracting those two, I would get an idea of the total number of, tests that were negative and the total number of tests that were positive. I would have expected both of these numbers to be higher, right, since it's at the test level, than the number of people tested. And so obviously that's not the case. So obviously my thinking is a little bit flawed on this. I need to do a little bit more homework on trying to understand that. But to me, this is a minor point. I don't think it's going to really help our understanding of anything meaningful. I think the meaningful elements were what I've discussed already in the YouTube video. So I would love to know what you think. Again, I know a lot of other people have dug under the hood of this and have been trying to figure this out. And again, I'm just being honest. I know that there are a lot of posts, for example, on Slack. I have not reviewed those. I probably should have before putting this video together. But what I decided to do over the weekend, as time permitted, is to just take these reports, figure out what I could, and put together a PowerPoint. So for those of you who may have figured it out, educate me more. For those of you to which this helps you to move along a little bit, continue moving forward and help me to continue to flesh out these numbers so that we can better understand them. So thanks everybody for your time. Hope you have a great week.